It was a typical afternoon in the heart of the city, a busy world where people rushed about, heads buried in their phones, hurrying to meetings, and worrying about deadlines. But in the middle of the chaos, a scene unfolded that would change everything for one man, a millionaire who had it all. But despite his wealth, something was missing in his life. He had everything anyone could dream of: luxury cars, an enormous mansion, and a lifestyle many could only envy. Yet as he strolled down the street, something caught his attention, something that would turn his world upside down. Through the bustling crowd, a faint sound broke through the usual noise, the sound of a child crying. It wasn't just any cry, it was desperate. A cry so full of pain and sorrow that it seemed to pull at the heartstrings of anyone who heard it. The millionaire's steps slowed as he tried to locate the source of the sound. His eyes scanned the sidewalk, passing over countless faces. But then he saw it, a little boy, no older than 5 or 6, standing near a trash can. His tiny hands were gripping the rim, his face streaked with tears, and his body trembled as he sobbed uncontrollably. The scene was heartbreaking, but what made it even more perplexing was that the child wasn't just crying. He was pointing at the trash can with a look of utter fear in his eyes. Something about the way the boy clung to the can, his face filled with confusion and dread, made the millionaire feel an odd chill run down his spine. What could possibly be so frightening about a trash can that would make this child react this way? Curiosity and concern surged through him. Without thinking, he made his way towards the boy, every step bringing him closer to the mystery. But as he approached, the cries grew louder, more frantic. The boy's small frame seemed to collapse further, as if he were trying to hide from something, and the millionaire could see him shaking uncontrollably. His instincts told him that something was terribly wrong, but he couldn't yet piece together why. When the millionaire reached the boy, he knelt down, trying to offer some comfort. He gently placed a hand on the child's shoulder, his voice soft and calm as he asked, "Hey, little one, what's wrong? Why are you so upset?" But the boy, through his tears, simply pointed again at the trash can, his finger trembling. His words were barely a whisper, but the millionaire could just make out what he said. "She's in there. She's in there." The millionaire's heart skipped a beat. "Who is in there?" he asked, his voice filled with confusion. But the boy couldn't speak anymore. His sobbing intensified, and the words he had spoken hung in the air, thick with uncertainty. It was as if the boy was too terrified to even finish his sentence. What could possibly be in that trash can to make a child react in such a way? The millionaire, despite his wealth and status, felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He had seen a lot in his life: luxury, power, and even danger. But this was something different. He glanced around, but the street was as busy as ever. No one seemed to notice or care about the boy or the situation unfolding right in front of them. His gaze shifted back to the trash can. There it stood, innocuous and ordinary, nothing more than a container for discarded items. But something about it now seemed sinister. The million-dollar question lingered in his mind. What was hidden inside? Just then, a figure appeared in the distance, a woman walking towards them. Her eyes were focused straight ahead, as if she hadn't noticed the scene taking place by the trash can. She looked ordinary at first glance, but there was something about her that caught the millionaire's attention. She moved with purpose in her eyes. Those eyes were cold, almost calculating. It wasn't just her expression that unsettled him. It was the way she seemed to ignore the child's cries entirely, as if she couldn't even hear him. The boy's sobbing grew even more desperate as the woman drew closer. His eyes, wide with terror, shifted back to the trash can, and he began to scream, his voice breaking with the sheer intensity of his fear. "No, no, don't let her near it. Please, please, no." The millionaire could barely process what he was hearing, his mind racing to understand the connection between the boy, the trash can, and the mysterious woman. And then, as if on cue, the woman stopped right next to the boy. Without a word, she reached down and, with a practiced hand, opened the lid of the trash can. The millionaire stood frozen, his heart pounding, as he watched in disbelief. What was inside? Was it truly something that could frighten a child this much? The woman glanced at him, her eyes narrowing as she noticed his presence for the first time. There was no warmth in her gaze, only something cold, something unsettling. "It's not your concern," she said, her voice low, almost too calm. The millionaire opened his mouth to respond, but before he could speak, the boy let out one final scream. A scream so full of terror that it sent a shiver down his spine. In that moment, everything seemed to slow. Time stretched, and the world around them disappeared, leaving only the trash can, the woman, and the child. The millionaire's mind raced. Should he stop her? Should he intervene? But before he could take another step, the woman did something that would haunt him forever. She reached into the trash can and pulled something out. The moment her hand emerged, the air seemed to freeze, and the boy's cries stopped as abruptly as they had started. The silence that followed was deafening. What had she pulled out of that trash can? What had caused this child to fear so intensely, and most importantly, why did the millionaire feel as if his life would never be the same again? Stay tuned, because the answer to these questions is about to unfold in a way that no one could have predicted. The silence that followed the woman's actions was suffocating. The millionaire stood there, frozen, trying to make sense of what he had just seen. The boy, now eerily quiet, still stared at the trash can as if it held the answers to the darkest questions in his life. But those answers were slipping away, just out of reach. The woman's cold, unblinking eyes met his for a moment, and for the first time in his life, the millionaire felt a deep, unsettling fear. A fear that came not from what he could see, but from what he couldn't. He couldn't tear his gaze away from the woman. She was calm, too calm, as if nothing had just happened. The boy's frantic cries had stopped, but his body still trembled. His tiny hands, once gripping the trash can for dear life, now hung limp by his sides, as if he had given up hope. The woman didn't even acknowledge him. Instead, her attention was entirely focused on the object she had retrieved from the trash. The millionaire took a cautious step forward. "What is that?" His voice trembled slightly, betraying the sense of unease building inside him. The woman didn't answer immediately. She only stood there, looking down at the item in her hands. It was wrapped in a dirty, torn cloth, and whatever was inside was hidden from view. But as the cloth shifted ever so slightly, the millionaire caught a glimpse of something. A flash of dark hair, a hand. A gasp caught in his throat. No, it couldn't be. The boy whimpered, his lips trembling as he whispered, "Please, put her back." His voice was barely audible, but the pain in it was unmistakable. The millionaire felt his heart drop. "Her," he muttered, almost to himself. The woman finally spoke, her voice sharp and cold. "You shouldn't have gotten involved." Her words sent a shiver down his spine, but before he could respond, she turned, her movements deliberate, and began walking away, as though this whole exchange were nothing more than a routine. Without thinking, the millionaire reached out, grabbing her arm. "Wait, what have you done to this boy? Who is she?" The woman's eyes flashed with a quick, almost imperceptible flicker of irritation. Then, without any further warning, she twisted her arm free from his grip with alarming ease. Her gaze met his once again, this time with a dark intensity that made his blood run cold. "She's just a child," the millionaire said, his words coming out in a rush, trying to make sense of what was happening. "Whatever you're doing, it's not right." The woman let out a soft, humorless laugh. You think this is about right and wrong. She took a step closer to him, and in that instant, the millionaire could feel her presence in a way that was almost suffocating. You have no idea what you're talking about. You have no idea who you're dealing with. The air felt thick with tension as the boy's face twisted in despair. He was staring at the woman now, his eyes wide with fear. The millionaire followed the boy's gaze, but his attention was drawn to the woman's hand, which was still tightly clutching the item wrapped in cloth. It was almost as if she were holding a secret, something too dangerous to be exposed to the world. As she continued to walk away, the millionaire's instincts screamed at him to stop her. But there was something holding him back, something deep inside that told him this wasn't just a simple case of child neglect or an encounter with a stranger doing something wrong. There was more to this, something darker, something far more sinister. In the distance, the sound of sirens began to grow louder, and for a brief moment, the woman seemed to hesitate. Her eyes flicked back to the boy, then to the millionaire. She didn't speak again, but the look she gave him was enough to tell him that this was far from over. She was warning him that if he pushed further, there would be consequences. With the sirens drawing closer, the woman's pace quickened, but the millionaire didn't back down. His desire to understand, to get to the bottom of this, had overwhelmed his fear. He was ready to find out exactly what was going on, no matter what it took. He called out to the boy, his voice steady despite the pounding of his heart. "Hey kid, what's going on? Who is she?" The boy looked at him, his eyes wide with terror, but his lips trembled and he shook his head. I can't say." But there was something about the way the boy spoke. His voice was barely above a whisper, but there was a weight behind his words. It was as if the boy had been forced to carry a burden too heavy for anyone his age to bear. Then in an almost inaudible voice, the boy said, "She's the reason. She's the reason I can't go back." The words hung in the air like a veil of dread, thick with mystery. The millionaire could feel the weight of them pressing down on him, but before he could ask anything more, the woman turned the corner and disappeared from sight. And just like that, she was gone. For a moment, the world around the millionaire felt strangely still. The sirens were getting closer, but they seemed like background noise now, an afterthought compared to the confusion and dread that consumed him. What had the boy meant? "She's the reason I can't go back." What could that possibly mean? But the boy wasn't speaking anymore. His body slumped against the trash can as if all the life had drained out of him. The millionaire couldn't shake the feeling that he had just witnessed something far more dangerous than he could comprehend. He knelt down beside the boy, trying to steady his breathing. "Kid, where do you live? What happened to you?" The boy looked up at him then, his eyes empty, filled with fear. "I don't live anywhere anymore," he whispered. "Not since that day." The millionaire's pulse quickened. What day? What had happened to this child? The sirens were getting closer, but the boy's words had left him in a state of shock. It was clear that the child knew more than he was letting on, but there was one thing that stood out above all else. Whatever had happened to this boy, it had something to do with the woman. And now the millionaire had to decide. Was he ready to uncover the dark truth, or would he leave it behind and let it consume him? The tension was building. The mystery was deepening. And the only thing he knew for sure was that the answers would change everything. The sirens grew louder, and the pressure in the air seemed to thicken. The boy's words echoed in the millionaire's mind. Not since that day. What had happened to him? What had this woman done? The mystery had deepened, and now the stakes were higher than ever. The millionaire was no longer just a bystander. He had become part of something far bigger than he had ever imagined. He couldn't leave it alone. There was a sense of urgency, a call deep within him that pushed him forward. The boy, though still trembling, had one last piece of information to give. The millionaire gently cupped the child's face in his hands, urging him to look at him. "Listen to me, kid," he said softly, his voice full of concern. "I need you to tell me what happened. You don't have to be scared. I'll help you." The boy hesitated, his wide eyes scanning the street as if he expected someone to jump out of the shadows. Finally, with a shuddering breath, the boy whispered, She's the one who took my sister." The words hit the millionaire like a punch to the stomach. His mind reeled as he tried to process them. The woman, this cold, calculating figure, had taken the boy's sister. The mystery now felt like a horror story, one that had only just begun to reveal its darkest secrets. The millionaire's heart raced. What had the woman done to this child's sister? Why had she taken her? And why had the boy been left behind? It was clear that something much deeper and more twisted was at play here. Before he could speak again, the boy looked up, his expression suddenly filled with something other than fear. There was a flicker of determination in his eyes, a quiet strength that hadn't been there before. She's not really human," the boy said in a low, haunted voice. "She's not like us." The millionaire's stomach turned. "What do you mean? What's she really?" But the boy was silent now, his body sagging as though the weight of his own words had drained him of whatever energy he had left. In that moment, the woman reappeared. But this time, she didn't walk by. She stood at the end of the alley, watching them, her figure outlined against the fading light of the day. The millionaire could feel her eyes boring into him, like she could see right through him. He stood up, his body tense, unsure whether to approach or retreat. His instincts screamed at him to leave, but his heart, and the boy's desperate gaze, told him he had no choice but to face the woman. With slow, deliberate steps, the woman walked toward them. The millionaire braced himself, his mind racing for something, anything that could explain what was happening. But as she drew closer, it wasn't just the tension that hung in the air. It was the feeling that whatever was about to happen, it was going to change everything. "Leave him alone," the millionaire said, his voice steady despite the overwhelming fear tightening his chest. "You've taken the boy's sister, haven't you? What have you done to her?" The woman stopped just in front of him, her eyes cold and calculating. "You don't understand," she replied, her voice like ice. "You're not supposed to." Then, as if in slow motion, she raised her hand, and the cloth she had been holding fell to the ground. The millionaire's heart skipped a beat as his eyes fell on the object, no, the person, inside. His breath caught in his throat as he realized that it wasn't just any child she had taken. It was the boy's sister, but not as he had expected. The little girl appeared to be frozen. Her face was pale, almost lifeless, her eyes wide open but unseeing. The millionaire's mind struggled to comprehend what he was seeing. "What did you do to her?" he demanded, his voice rising with a mix of fear and anger. The woman's lips curled into a small, almost sadistic smile. "I didn't do anything. She's alive. She's just not quite the same anymore." Her words dripped with something that felt like mockery. "She's part of something far bigger than you'll ever understand. Something far beyond your wealth or your simple little life." The boy's sister twitched ever so slightly in the cloth, her small body jerking as if waking from a deep sleep. The millionaire felt his blood run cold as the woman's words began to sink in. There was something unnatural about this, something wrong. The air around them seemed to crackle with an energy that made his skin crawl. "You're part of something bigger," the millionaire repeated, struggling to make sense of her cryptic words. "What are you talking about? What's happening to these children?" The woman's expression shifted for a brief moment, her coldness faltering just enough for the millionaire to see something else, something human, beneath her icy exterior. But it was gone as quickly as it had come, replaced again by that chilling calm. "You won't believe it," she said softly, almost like a warning. "Not until you see it with your own eyes." Before he could react, she turned and started walking away. The boy's sister stirred again, her hand twitching as though reaching for something. The millionaire hesitated for only a moment before he followed. Every instinct told him to run, to get away from this nightmare, but his feet wouldn't move. He had to know what this woman was hiding, what she had done to these children. As the woman walked into the shadows, the boy looked up one last time, his eyes filled with sorrow and regret. "You won't save her," he whispered. "It's too late." The millionaire's heart dropped as he followed the woman into the unknown, feeling the weight of the boy's words pressing down on him. He had come looking for answers, but now he realized that some mysteries were never meant to be solved. Some stories, no matter how much you tried to unravel them, could only end in darkness. And as he followed her into the depths of the city, he couldn't help but wonder if he was walking toward his own destruction too. But it was too late to turn back now. The answers lay ahead, and there was no turning away from the truth, however terrifying it might be. The million-dollar question remained: was he ready to face the nightmare that was waiting for him?